Hello and welcome to this tutorial on the MiG-21 and how to land it in DCS. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is level out the plane. Make sure my throttle is set to something reasonable. We'll go with around 85% throttle. And we'll go ahead and activate or turn on active pause. And here's my throttle RPMs are roughly 85%. My vertical speed is a little bit higher than 0, which is you want to go ahead and set your pitch trim for a little bit more than 0, because it's a lot better to be climbing just a little bit than it is to be descending, because the descent rate will increase rapidly. And then we'll go ahead and do a couple of things to set up for this landing demonstration or training run. Some things to note here. This is your altimeter, and as you can see here, we're about 1900 meters altitude. The fat needle points to thousands of meters, while the skinny needle is in hundreds of meters. So here you can see we're close to 2000 meters altitude. This is your radio altimeter, but it only works up to 600 meters above ground level. One of the things we want to make sure we do is take care of this gear handle fixator. Now it will allow us to move the gear handle down when we're ready and back to the neutral position afterwards. But we won't do that just yet. We'll wait till we get about 14 kilometers from the runway before we do that. Next, the other thing we'll do is set up our RSBN navigation panel. We'll go to RSBN channel 15, which is Coppoletti, the airfield that we're going to land at. The green lights mean we're receiving a valid signal, and likewise you can hear the Morse code tone for it. There's the volume knob, you can turn that down a bit. And we'll turn on our RSBN bearing and distance switches, and we'll set this to channel 15 as well. This is like the Russian equivalent of ILS, or Instrument Landing System. It's called PRIG. And then for right now, we'll set the RSBN arc switch to the up RSBN position. Now with all that set, this skinny needle will indicate the direction to Coppoletti, the skinny needle here. And over here you'll find the distance in kilometers to the RSBN station that we have selected at Coppoletti. Now ideally you would already have set up all this navigation stuff earlier, so you don't have to do it while you're making your approach. And note that in this training exercise we've got quite a bit of fuel. We've got about 3,200 liters of fuel. Normally after a sortie it would be quite a bit less than that, probably around 1,000 liters or so, but for demonstration purposes I wanted to show that you can land just fine with ordnance and a decent load of fuel on board. So with that, oh yeah, one other note. Active pause, I highly recommend using that while you're training yourself. That way you can sort of do a crawl, walk, run approach to your self-training on your landings. And then, you know, when you get well practiced enough, you can just you can do everything in real time. So let me unpause the simulation here, and all we're gonna do is descend, try to get down to about 1,000 meters altitude and 14 kilometers from Coppoletti. We're going too fast. Take the throttle back. Try not to get the throttle percentage below 50. She might flame out. So I'm watching that altimeter over here, keeping an eye on that. And my airspeed. Okay, so I see my airspeed's getting down around 550. I don't really want it to drop much lower than that right now, so I'm going to throttle up. And we're probably 1250 meters altitude right now. And over here, you can see that we're about 21 kilometers from Kobaleti. And now I see it visually there in my HUD. So I'll go ahead and start lining up the runway a bit here. And now we're actually less than 1,000 meters. So I'll go ahead and level out the aircraft, and I'll go ahead and enter active pause again. Now, at this point, we're 18 kilometers from the runway, but I want to show you the landing mode, or the ILS system for the MiG-21. In order for that to work, there's two switches that you have to activate. You have to put this one in a down position, which is land, and then you also have to set the RSBN arc switch to the down position. Once you've done that and you're right on the correct PRMG landing channel for that airfield, then you'll be receiving a valid signal for your ILS course correction indicators. Now, you can think of these yellow lines as indicating where you should be. So this right here is telling me I need to be a little bit higher and to the left. So let's go look up visually and see what's going on here. Here's the runway. As we can see, we do in fact need to be further over to the left, and it's kind of hard to tell from here, but we do need to be a little bit higher to be on the ideal glide slope. So with that in mind, let's unpause the simulation, and we'll just maintain our current attitude and kind of watch those ILS indicators. Okay, so I'm actually climbing a bit right now, as you can see on the variometer, but now we're on glide slope, so I'm going to go ahead and start descending again by looking at that variometer, pitching down a bit, and we've just crossed over the line of approach, as you can see by the ILS. So now that we're 10 kilometers out, we're a bit late. I'll go ahead and active pause. We should have already had our landing gear down. So put those down, and then you'll get 3 green lights letting you know that they're down. And then you want to, as soon as you get those, you hear the 3 clicks and see the green lights that they're down, you want to return the gear lever to the neutral position. And the reason for this is because if you don't, you'll bleed off, you'll lose a lot of bleed air or compressed air, and your brakes and some other things won't function properly. So it's good to have that on a very easily accessible keybind. So that's, for right now, that's all we're going to do. Now from this point, as soon as I undo the active pause, things are gonna happen fairly quickly. Pretty much all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep the runway. I'm just gonna kinda, this is for a visual approach. Things would be different if it were at nighttime. You'd have to rely a whole lot more on your instrumentation, but I can make that a separate video. I'm gonna generally keep the runway in the bottom 1/3, and then I'm gonna drop my flaps. I've got a key binding for the flaps. I'm gonna drop the flaps to takeoff position here, and then when I get about 300 meters from the runway, I'm gonna put them down to the landing position. And the whole time, I'm gonna regulate my pitch with the stick to maintain the proper, or close to the proper attitude, and also put in pitch trim where I can to help relieve some of the pressure on the stick to where it's easier to make adjustments. Okay, so flaps to landing position. We'll throttle back. And we're a bit high according to the ILS. So we'll nose down a bit. You see that little yellow line over there telling us we're still just a tad above glide slope. We're at 500 kilometers an hour. We're on glide slope, so I'm gonna pick up the nose a bit. Now we're at 400. I don't want to get too much less than 400 or just above it. We're a little bit low according to the ILS, so I'm gonna pick the nose up a bit. We're staying at 400. Okay, so now I'm gonna drop the flaps to the landing position, 45 degrees down. We're gonna throttle up a little bit. I'm gonna throttle back. Then I'm gonna pop my chute. Now as we can see in the mirror here, it deployed. Start touching my wheel brakes now a bit. And if you want to be realistic about things, you keep rolling all the way to the taxiway, and you keep your chute up. You don't dump it until you get onto the taxiway at least. Okay, so we drop our chute. We'll take the throttle back to idle. And as we can see, we've got no burst tires or anything. And that's it. Thanks for watching.